Welcome to all my fantasy football friends, those who are looking to move from the freshman ranks to the upper class. This is Dynasty 365. I'm your host, Chris Burns. My classmates, Tyler Howell and Rich Sickles, well, they're not here tonight because they're suspended for taking too long in slow drafts. You guys know who they are. So tonight, we were going to have the boss man. He might pop in for a little bit to be our substitute teacher, so expect to look for him. But our special guest and acting principal for tonight is none other than Jim Coventry from RotoWire. And tonight, we're going to review the potential sophomore star breakouts, for the upcoming season. And with that, I'm going to be like Jerry Judy and drop the music. Let's go. Welcome to the talented, the legendary Jim Coventry. You can find his content over at RotoWire, and you can follow him on Twitter at Jim Coventry NFL. Jim, he will also be on the SiriusXM Fantasy channel on weekends beginning in early July. So make sure you tune in and get it. Jim, welcome. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
It's always a great day to talk football, and it's even better when I thought I was going to get ghosted by Jorge, and he showed up.
That is great. So Jorge, welcome. Good to see you.
Sorry for being late, gentlemen. Jim, great to see you as always, sir.
Yeah, so before we went live, Jim and I were talking, and Jim, I think Jorge has a studio bugged, like the virtual studio, because he just came in almost right on cue. But it's good to see you tonight, Jorge.
Thank you.
So everybody watching, remember to drop your comments, questions, whatever you might have into the chats, or tweet us. If you have any trade questions, feel free to throw those in as well, and we'll respond as we can. All right. So, fellas, tonight we're going to be talking about, the sophomore breakouts and those dynasty players, who were rookies last year, who have the potential to have a stellar season this year, like breakout of sorts. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. But first, we're going to talk about a little bit of breaking news. So it has been official now. It's been officially announced that the Bears will be the team on Hard Knocks this year. Jim, are you a Hard Knocks fan, and how do you feel about the Bears?
I've never watched Hard Knocks. I hear about it all the time. It goes on during the part of the season where I'm working my tail off for football, and so entertainment goes out the window. But I will say this. I live in Chicago, and the one thing I'm interested in, who's going to be the personality? If Caleb Williams isn't, DJ Moore's the most awesome, unassuming dude in the world. Keenan Allen, I can't remember hearing him yell about anything ever because he always got targets, maybe. So I mean, it's who's gonna be the inflammatory person? If it's not Caleb Williams, I'm a little bit worried.
I hear you, but Caleb, I think Caleb's got enough showtime for everybody. He might have a spinoff, like the first player to have a spinoff from Hard Knocks. Jorge, what do you think about it?
Well, I think this is Rome Odunze's time to shine in terms of having the camera and the on him and being able to steal some spotlight there. Stealing targets is going to be kind of difficult for him during the season, so he might as well steal whatever he can in the off season. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I really wish that the Commanders would have been the team. I've been begging and praying that they finally put this team on the spotlight, my home team, but alas, it's Chicago. But, it makes sense. The number one overall pick going to the Bears, this is a high profile environment. I think we can all say, and I think we've all said heading into the NFL draft that we all pretty much assumed that it was going to be Caleb Williams, number one overall. And when have we seen a rookie walk into a position where his offensive talent is so loaded, whether it's at running back or a wide receiver or even tight end, and even on defense? I mean, this team is really stacked. And so it's going to be fun to see him and his comradeship he has with his fellow teammates.
Yeah, he walks in the complete 180 situation of what Justin Fields walked in there to. So,
yeah.
There's great. Also, good to see you guys in the chat. Jamie, I appreciate you. You're one of our favorites as well. Rachel, happy Wednesday to you as well. All right, so Jorge.
Yes, sir.
A few seconds ago, you're just talking about like Roma Dunze stealing targets. So we're talking about somebody who's going to be stealing targets. That transitions perfectly to this next piece of news. Like Jalen Waddle, 3-year, $84.75 million with $76 million guaranteed. They extended him. I thought that they would. I didn't know if they'd do that, but how do you feel about that?
I mean, it makes sense. You know, there's always the rumblings we hear every year of, remember when Tyreek Hill said that he was going to retire in 3 years? Well, now it's 2 years out. And then next year it's going to be like, oh, next year is going to be the year. I personally don't. I'll believe it when I see it. It depends how much the Dolphins owner opens up their checkbook to see how long, you know, Tyreek Hill is in the league. But that, of course, is contingent on his play on the field. But I like it for Jalen Waddle. You know, it's good for him. I don't know. I'm not like I saw this signing and I'm like, whoa, they got Jalen Waddle for life. They're set. You know, I think there are other areas on the field that they could have maybe addressed in free agency with some of that money, preferably on the defensive side of the ball, just because of all the injuries they dealt with last year. But you got to lock up your superstars. You know, obviously the Dolphins want to make a big run going forward. They're not happy with what happened last year. But when we are talking about targets for the Miami Dolphins, there is one player I want to bring to people's attention. Malik Washington out of University of Virginia, drafted there. That's a name. That's a name. He may not steal a whole bunch of targets from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, but this is a name that could be potential, you know, if you're playing in a multiplex league, waiver wire ad of the week or player injury ad of the week. That, you know, he did everything you could ask him at the University of Virginia. Opposing teams knew that, hey, this is the Virginia offense. It's Malik Washington. We got to stop him, and they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's a late round sleeper, especially for those in dynasty leagues. But to your point, I'm not surprised by Jalen Waddle.
All right, I like it. Jim, before I give my little input on it, I'm going to ask you: does this Jalen Waddle get extended? Does that move the needle for you at all?
Well, I think it's a stacking procedure because Jorge mentioned Tyreek Hill, but look, Tua is either going to be gone or he's going to get paid at the end of the season. It's one or the other. And it's impossible to just hope you're going to wish into a quarterback. So if they got to pay Tua Tagovailoa, he's going to get a market rate contract because that's what the alternative is. That's what it is. That somebody's going to pay him. So at this point, you've got to lock down a receiver. If you're going to pay Tua, that means Tyreek's gone. That there's no way Tyreek's coming back after that because they will simply not be able to afford it.
I love the way you put that. And I kind of feel the same way. And as a Dolphin fan, like, yes, I like Jalen Waddle. Although I will go on record in saying that when they drafted him number 7 overall, I was not happy about it. I was completely against it. I wish they had drafted Penei Sewell. And if you ask me, fast forward to now, I feel the same way. They should have drafted Penei Sewell instead of Jalen Waddle. And what I don't like what the Dolphins are doing, the championship window is almost closed. And they pushed all their chips in without having a championship team. They went all in with just having a playoff team. Miami is not getting over the top. They're not beating the Patrick Mahomeses or, you know, the Lamar Jacksons or the Josh Allens even. You know, they're not ready to do all this. And when you're paying from the outside in, like when you build a team, you want to build a team inside out. You want to make sure you have those staples on the offensive line. You want to make sure you have the quarterback. There's a lot of questions as to the quarterback. And you want to make sure that you have those edge rushers that can get to the quarterback. And then if you have all that, well, before that, I mean, you also want to have that lockdown corner that can cover because it is shifting to a passing league. Miami, do they have any of that? And so they're spending a lot of money on skill positions, like it's a splash and everything. Like even the signing of Tyreek Hill, like breaking the record for a wide receiver when you're A, not sure about your quarterback, B, you haven't had an offensive line since Chris Greer became the general manager, C, you're not sure if Tua is going to be your guy or not. And what letter am I? Q, you know, the defense had so many holes in it. Like, so the move, like, I'm happy for Jalen Waddle. I'm hoping that he does great and hope it's beautiful. But like you said, with this, it just, to me, really signifies that Tyreek won't be around next year because they can't pay him. Because right now with Tua, all right, he might not be the top tier quarterback, but if you don't have him, what do you have? You know, it's not so easy to go out there and find like a quarterback that led the league in the numbers that he did last year. So good for Jalen Waddle. For the Miami Dolphins, I feel in the future, it's going to hurt real bad in a few years. You know, they feel like they're doing what the Saints did, where they're just spending all this money that they don't have, and they're going to try to keep kicking the can. Eventually, that payment's going to come due. So, but that's all I have for that. Another note. So I don't know if you guys follow the Olympics at all, but have you guys heard the story of Gable Stevenson?
Yes. Isn't he a gold? Didn't he win the gold in the Olympics a couple years ago?
Yes, he won the gold medal for freestyle wrestling in the Olympics. And I mean, like, he wrestled at the University of Minnesota. He's 24 years old, 6'1", 265 pounds. And he just signed a 3-year deal with the Bills on Friday. You know, so it's a rookie deal, and it's still an uphill battle for him to actually make the team and to contribute. But it's absolutely amazing that there's a gold medalist. So I am an Olympic crazy person. Like, Jim, what you got?
The last wrestler I remember that was on an NFL team was Brock Lesnar.
Yes, yes.
Minnesota, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Because he was like an NCAA champion, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I believe so.
Yes, he was an NCAA champion. He dominated in obviously pro wrestling, UFC, MMA, and he even left the WWF at the time it was called to go to Vikings training camp and just see, you know, and he didn't make the team, but you know what? The coaches and the players respected the hell out of him, and he put up a good showing.
Yeah, he did, and he's a beast. Like, he reminds me of me, you know, when I was younger.
Like last week, younger.
Yeah. You know, I shrunk and I lost a lot of muscle, but other than that. All right, guys. So we're getting into the bread and butter of the show tonight, and it's going to be the sophomore breakout candidates. So there's a lot of rookies that did a lot of good things last year. We're not going to talk about those that were exceptional last year, you know, because we expect them to build on top of that. But some of the ones that we felt like didn't get a fair shake, or we're expecting to take a massive leap, you know, in their second season, we're going to talk about those guys tonight. So, Jim, I'm going to bring it to you first off, you know, being like the, you know, guest principal tonight. If you were to target a sophomore player, a second-year player in dynasties this year, who would you be going after?
Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I would trade what I needed to do to get him. You know, when we look at last year, and I was on this early, I was like, for last year, I wasn't in at all on him because we knew Pete Carroll loves his veterans. We knew that they were going to play a lot of 2 tight end sets. They did. They were probably about 10th, 12th in the league in that. And the target crunch was going to hit in Jigba. And Jackson Smith and Jigba had like 150 less snaps, like 30 less targets than the other receivers, and the ADOT 7th percentile. It was like all these short passes. Now, he was great after the catch. He was like 83rd percentile. But here's what I like this year. So, look, I'm not a fan of any college coach coming to the NFL because there is almost no track record of being successful. But here is what I think is going to happen. Ryan Grubb comes in. Well, first of all, we noticed the Seahawks. They let Kobe Parkinson and they let Will Dissly walk. Now, this is a team that played a lot of heavy personnel. Now, all of a sudden, it's not a very imposing tight end depth chart. Tells me they're going to play a lot more light sets. So that means receivers are going to be on the field. But the other thing that I really caught, Tyler Lockett had 122 targets last year, second most of his career. But his play regressed significantly. The targets made his numbers look okay, but he wasn't Tyler Lockett. Another year of aging. Smith and Jigba did, given the way he was used, showed more than enough that he was a 20th pick in the draft and worth it. I really believe Smith and Jigba is the number 2 on this team now, not Tyler Lockett. And Geno Smith can get enough done. So I think people are still going to think Lockett's going to really eat up work with him. I don't see that happening. Smith and Jigba is going to take off this year.
Okay. I love it. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I'm a huge, and I wanted to piggyback on what you were just saying, Jim, as far as yards after the catch. I mean, yes, there were issues with him getting volume, but he was fifth in yards after the catch for PFF, yards after the catch for reception. He was wide receiver 5, and I'm ranking these players based off of, the rookies that were coming into last year, so second-year players this year. And I saw there was somebody, I believe it was Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros on Twitter earlier today. Don't forget, like, he had wrist surgery in the preseason, and last time I checked, getting a bolt in your wrist, getting that then removed, and then kind of getting up to par, being a rookie, getting up to speed there, takes some time. But we saw that, when the ball got in his hands, he did make plays with it. It's just a matter of, like, does this team want to get its playmakers the ball? I would hope so. I would hope every team wants to get their playmakers the ball. And good call on Tyler Lockett right there. I guess let me bounce this back to you, Jim, because let me just hypothetically, let's tell you we're talking in a super flex type of dynasty league. And I know I'm completely throwing you on the spot here, so if you don't have an answer, please don't worry. Like, what is something what is a pick value you would want to give up to get JSN? Is he definitely like a high second round type of pick in your dynasty leagues, or what do you think?
So I'm not going to be able to answer it that way, and I'll tee it up back to you, but I'll tell you what I would say. What I'd say is this: I know people will be a little down on him after last year, even though they might see the future. So I'm willing to pay for somebody who's a bit more established, because I think Smith and Jim is going to outplay his draft value, and that's the only way I can answer that. I can't tell you like grounds and this and that. Can't really do that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So before we move on, I do have a quick question for you guys, because it seems like both of you are in Jigba. Do you think the new Seahawks head coach, Mr. McDonald, that defensive mind coming from Baltimore, you think he's going to try to curb the aerial attack and try to just make it like Baltimore West and run the ball some more, like Carroll did?
Go ahead, Jorge. I'll answer next.
Sure. So a lot of the minicamp reports and the voluntary OTA reports that I've been reading and watching is that Geno Smith has been making tremendous strides, getting this playbook down. We're seeing a lot more emphasis on the downhill passing, the vertical passing, less of the short 8-out throws, more of the longer throws. And so, yeah, give me all that. I'm excited about that. I think it's one of those things where McDonald is like, my strength is here, Grubb's strength is there. Let me just get out of this guy's way and work his magic, like he did with Michael Penix at Washington last year. So I'm very excited. I think this is going to be a very aggressive Seattle Seahawks team on offense. Not to take anything away from the running game. I'm sure they'll find ways to balance this out. But look, you have, at least for now, 3 receiving targets. Tyler Lockett, we can debate, does he have left in the tank? Sure. But, you have that personnel as you do currently. And so, yeah, I'm excited for what they're going to do in the passing game.
Love it. Jim.
Now, real quick on this as well, when you talk about Mike McDonald was a master at simulated pressures. The quarterbacks never knew where somebody was coming from. And there were times you would see that a defender would hit the quarterback unblocked. And if you're watching TV, you're like, well, why don't they block? It was because they simply had no clue. Here's going to be the problem. This defense is not going to be great first year, because first of all, McDonald has to learn what all of these players can do. Right. Not just teaching them the nuances of, there's a bunch of concepts. He did make it kind of easy for the Ravens players to learn it, but it's a lot of moving the needle and testing it out and seeing what can work. I think it's at least 8 to 10 weeks before McDonald's comfortable enough to start pulling levers. And because if his players blow the assignment, it's going to turn into like big plays against them. I think it's a 2-year process for McDonald to be a good defense for that team.
Okay. I like it. Good stuff. I agree with both of you guys. And I'm hoping that, this is how it's going, because I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens. And I'm excited for my JSN share selfishly, but don't,
you know who I'm excited for also with this Seahawks team? And I know it's not going to be this year, but if for some reason Geno Smith doesn't cut the mustard this year and it keeps his negative downhill trajectory, and call me a homer, even though he's no longer on my team anymore. Look, there is some like positive talk coming out in terms of Sam Howell and his ability to. And we saw who expected Sam Howell week 8 to lead the league in NFL in passing yards last year. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing it out there. Let's just throw Sam Howell some love. How realistic is that to happen? That's a different story, but just throwing it out there. If you're able to acquire him, have him ride your bench for a little bit, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Okay. That is true homerism. I mean, he moved 3,000 miles away. You're still capable. I love it.
It's quite the banishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
Jorge, like you talked about Sam Howell, but who's a sophomore breakout that's on your radar right now?
I think so. I'm approaching this from like a dynasty perspective, from a roster obviously, it's a dynasty show, but I'm approaching this from like a roster management perspective. Okay. What quarterback for dynasty is more attainable than Bryce Young right now? Like what did he do positively that you could walk away saying, oh, I better demand a first or a high second? Like nothing he did. Now I will say this. I will say there is hope that he takes a big jump. Obviously, you can't go any lower than he played last year, right? So he's going to he's going to have to do better in some degree. But you have Dave Canales coming over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who quote unquote worked his magic with Baker Mayfield, who the year before was in Seattle working his magic with Geno Smith. There is something to be said to that. I don't know. I can't quantify that. I can't give you an exact metric as far as what that entails, but what a track record kind of does speak for itself. And like I said, he can't play worse than he did last year. Not to mention, they're surrounding this young man with more weapons than he had last year. We look at it's not whether it's at the running back position or the wide receiver position. I really like the addition of Deontay Johnson there from Pittsburgh. I think he's going to be a target volume hog there for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the veteran presence there that they need. You look at the running back position, and I'm not writing off Chuba Hubbard either. I think there's definitely a role for him, especially this year. Obviously they bring in the rookie, and then they obviously bring in Xavier Legette at wide receiver to end out the first round of the NFL draft. So I think there's tons of upside in super flex leagues. Quarterbacks are valuable; they're gold. And this is the opportunity to get some straight up gold for the cheap, before training camp starts, before the reports start coming out, before you start hearing on every single show, well, the rapport between Bryce Young and insert player name starts coming on every single day, then that price is going to get a lot more steep. So now in the doldrums of summer, when we get into June and there's not a lot going on, now is the time to strike and make those acquisitions for your dynasty team.
100%. Totally agree. You got any thoughts on Bryce, Jim?
One thing lateral point I want to make is Jorge mentioned Chuba Hubbard very quietly in the offseason. And I know you're going to laugh when I say it, but they added Rashad Penny to the roster. Now, I know last year he was healthy, but he was banished in Philly. I don't think he lost all his talent. I don't think that happened. I think Philly just, whatever it was, he didn't fit. Dave Canales used to coach him back in the day.
That's fair.
He brought Penny in for a reason. And look, if he gets 6 games out of Penny, you're going to think, what the heck? What have I got to lose? Put him on the field, let him play. If he gets hurt, he gets hurt. I mean, it is what it is. Now, I know the rookie Jonathan Brooks is going to be the lead guy, assuming health from the ACL. But the number 2, why wouldn't you use your change of pace, Rashad Penny, give him 6 carries? He could turn that 6 carries into 80 yards. We know how that goes, right? Sure. I really wonder, though, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe he did lose everything and he's no good anymore, but it's just been injuries. That's all it's been. So I'm interested to see if they're going to give him that 6 carries a game.
For sure. Definitely. I like that. So, I mean, it looks like arrow is definitely pointing up for Bryce Young going into his second season. As Jorge said, it's kind of hard for it to go anywhere else, but I'm rooting for the guy because I felt so bad for him last year. The situation was just awful. So it's looking a lot better already coming into 2024. So I'll tell you guys about a player that I'm pretty interested in coming into 2024. Another quarterback. He is the mayonnaise-loving Will Levis of your Tennessee Titans. And so why am I going in on Will Levis right now? Why do I think he's going to have a breakout? I'll tell you exactly why. I got some points here, so let me know what you think after this. So right now, in Dynasty ADP, he's going as the QB 29 in Dynasty startups. So he's going to be the starter. There's only 32 starters, so you would think that, he will have a chance. But there's other guys that are, who aren't going to be starters or projected as starters that are going ahead of him. So that's that. His value right now is pretty low, so you can get him pretty cheap. Everybody loved that one throw that he made in his pro day. So, I mean, he's got a huge arm. He's got a cannon, and he's got the prototypical size of 6'4", 229 pounds. Like, he's what you look for when you look at the size of a quarterback in the league. And the Tennessee Titans, they're like, okay, we don't know if Levis is going to be the guy, but we're going to find out if he is a guy right now. And they are going in on him. They brought in Calvin Ridley, and they brought in the slot wide receiver extraordinaire, Mr. Tyler Boyd. They both joined DeAndre Hopkins, who is a stud in himself. So Derrick Henry, he's gone. But then they brought in Tony Pollard. He joins Tajay Spears. And with that whole dynamic, it seems to be a little more faster pace and not a lot of churning like the tough yardage with those short carries that Henry was getting before he broke one loose, wearing you down late in the second half. Another problem they had, their offensive line was woeful. So what do? They spent the number 7 overall pick on J.C. Latham. Latham's been great. They brought in offensive line coach Bill Callahan. You might be familiar with some of his work like in the last 4 years in Cleveland. Did a pretty good job there. And they brought in some other pieces to beef up that offensive line. So what Tennessee is telling me right now by their actions is that we're trying to score some points. We're trying to be, an up and lively team. So like I said, Callahan, he's there. The OC, Nick Holes, he was the passing game coordinator for the Jags last season. Passing game, so keyword right there. Why is this going to help Levis? Well, the new head coach, Brian Callahan, here's a direct quote. I quote, "We want to be of great detail in the passing game. Route definition, route spacing. We want to be able to complete a high percentage of balls. That's always going to be the goal." And I know what you're saying right now. You're like, Chris, coach speak. It's summertime. You can't believe what these coaches say. You have to watch what they do. And that's true. And then when he talked about it again after he said that, they're going to be committed to the run, blah, blah, blah. That's coach speak. But then he also says that the teams that win most games in NFL, this is a quote again, are the teams that pass the ball. That's what he told WKRC in Cincinnati. Cincinnati.
So, nice reference.
Thank you.
A lot of people out there don't get that, but that was a good reference. True.
And if you didn't get it, I still love you, but it means you just didn't graduate when I did, probably. So he also says, like, that's usually because those teams have really good quarterbacks and because they have guys on the outside who can make plays. The passing game has become a focal point. So when listening to Callahan, he's coming into it, and they've made the moves where they're going to see what Will Levis can do. They're giving him all the tools and all the opportunity to prove that he was one of those top quarterbacks that came out of that class. And I think that it's all signs that are great, because if you have the coach that believes in you, you have the team that is pushing forward a pass-first mentality or an offensive-minded mentality. It's a little different than last year with Vrabel and crew, because Vrabel was from the old school of we're going to slow the game down and we're going to beat you with hard-nosed defense. So I expect Tennessee to be a lot different looking than they were last year, and not to mention explosiveness in Jacksonville, explosiveness in, Houston, and explosiveness in Indianapolis. So they're going to have to score some points to keep up with those division opponents. So for that reason, I'm in on Will Levis right now. I think he is poised to have a breakout season. So now that I've laid it out for you, am I crazy, or, could it possibly, be something for Levis this year?
It's going to be very important for Levis to gain accuracy in the short and intermediate area. Film came out very quickly on him, and defenses immediately, they knew he was throwing deep, 99th percentile average depth of pass. But teams knew at that point, make him beat us underneath. And all of a sudden, you saw teams going to a deeper shell than usual. And it's like, we don't think you can win underneath. And he was very, very uncomfortable throwing short and intermediate. He had 21% bad passes, like 26 percentile is not good. If he can clean up to an acceptable level, short and intermediate, we know he's got the deep arm. He definitely has that. But if he can't get the ball, especially, here's the thing. Sometimes just throwing the ball to a receiver is one thing. but throwing it to where you lead them into space. And that's been a problem. Like Garrett Wilson last year, he was getting killed because not just was a bad quarterback play, but when they got the ball to him, it didn't lead him into space. So he get no yardage after that. So Will Levis is going to have to refine that part of the game. And it's very possible he does. He was a rookie last year. So he needed some development time. It can happen, but that part is a real big concern.
That is a really, really good point, Jim. And I thank you for making that, because I think that at least the mindset that Callahan is having coming into the season, he's thinking about the spacing and the route definition and everything. I think bringing in Tyler Boyd, like showing where, you know, somebody who can like get the short intermediate, the crossers and everything, he can do that stuff. And then bringing in Tony Pollard, who we know has the hands and he can catch things out of the backfield. I think that they're going to scheme a lot to where it's going to be really quick reads and Levis getting the ball out of his hands quickly. I think it's going to be kind of similar to what Carolina did with Cam Newton when Christian McCaffrey came in. You know, so Christian McCaffrey comes in, they want to spread it out a little bit. Unlike Tennessee last year with Derrick Henry, everybody's loaded up in the box knowing that they're going to run it because they had nobody who could catch it, and they had a monster back there. So you make a really good point, and I think that they recognize that, and I think they're going to try to coach him up. But like to your point, it's whether he can accept that and take those strides. So I totally agree with you there.
First of all, I agree with 100% what you guys are saying, but I think you kind of also are seeing break glass in case of emergency situation if Will Levis doesn't turn out with the Tony Pollard signing and another running back that I think we'll be discussing very soon. I think it's one of those things where he gives Will Levis that check down pass, or at the very least gives him that 1-2 punch to take the pressure off of him. If he starts seeing the Sam Darnold ghosts, like Darnold said us on a Monday Night Football years ago on the field. But you had it right. You know, you can bring over the offensive coordinator Callahan from the Cincinnati Bengals and his what he did in the passing attack there as head coach now, just influencing this team. This is not going to be the team, the Tennessee Titans that you've been used to. This is going to be, like you said, a very pass heavy oriented team, but it's the Tony Pollard signing that for me, it's like, okay, if things start going downhill fast, watch that revert back to more of a 1-2 punch with Tony Pollard and another running back that we'll be talking about soon. So,
yeah. I mean, so that running back that Jorge is alluding to, if you guys have not figured out yet, is none other than Tyjae Spears. You know, so he was the running mate to Derrick Henry last year, and a lot of fantasy owners really thought that he would take off last season because they thought it was the death of Derrick Henry a year early, and it still hasn't come yet. So with Tyjae Spears, Jim, how do you feel about him going into next season?
It's going to be interesting. Now, we know he was a third-round pick. He was deemed as a player to have significant talent. I'm always worried when the number 2 back is significantly different than the number 1 and dominates. I've seen this for decades. 2 years ago, Tony Pollard. Here's what happens. The lead back sets the pace. The defense plays at the speed of the lead back. All of a sudden, you get the changeup who comes in, and he's a different style of back. The defense doesn't say, hey, got to play faster now. Pollard's on the field. It does not work that way. Muscle memory, and you're playing this down after down. You are playing at the speed that's dictated in the game. So now you see that changeup, and Pollard went off 2 years ago. But we have seen many backs over the history of the game do this. So Tyjae Spears, yes, he comes in. 152 touches, like 830 yards. He looked dynamic. 80th percentile broken tackle rate. Everything looked great. We're going to learn this year if it was, did he benefit from Derrick Henry setting the tone against the defense? And we don't know. We'll never know that. But how many years do we draft a running back who's out of that situation? I think Jaylen Warren last year, he's still there. But I mean, how much did Jaylen Warren benefit from being the change up to Najee? It's always going to be this way. Some backs will break it and they'll overcome it because they're that good. But I'm always nervous about it now.
I like that. I mean, that's a really, really good point. And Jorge, we're going to come to you to get your thoughts on it first. But first, we got a question. And John is asking, in a Dynasty Superflex tight end premium, Levis, Chig, and the 305. Oh, excuse me. Levis, Chig, the 305, and the 402 for JSN.
And the
I can't
206 and 205 for
Okay.
My immediate thought is Superflex. You're trading away a quarterback again. We said quarterbacks are gold in Superflex leagues. You're giving away tight end premium. You're giving away Chigakonko, two Titans. Wow, this is like the Titans session of the podcast here. I think for JSN, again, I'll say the generic thing. It depends on your roster construction, but if you're hurting at wide receiver, I think you may want to get more in terms of draft pick compensation, a little bit higher there. But I would definitely try to acquire a JSN in this situation.
Okay. Jim, what are your thoughts on that trade?
I'm with Jorge completely on that. I mean, like you said, quarterbacks are gold, but it all depends what you believe in Will Levis. If you believe that he is going to be a future, maybe not a star, but a top third quarterback, then I almost think you got to keep the quarterback. But I do think he's going to struggle. I see like Jay Cutler here, personally. And so in that case, through my perspective, I'm going to go with the JSN side. But like I heard you talk earlier, Chris, and you painted a nice picture for Levis, and that may be the reality. And if that is, though, and if you're on that side, then you got to keep Levis.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's going to be somewhere between his first game starting with the 4 touchdowns and how he finished the rest of the season. So that's a cop-out answer for sure right there. I think it's going to be somewhere between that. All right. So, John, to answer your question, like majority is going with the JSN side. Am I correct in saying that, fellas?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so there we go. So, Jorge, back to you.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on Tajay?
Look, Tajay Spears, when you look at his efficiency metrics from last year, it's very impressive. Like he was the running back 12 in breakaway win percentage, and I'm talking about being better than or being right up there with Saquon Barkley, James Collar, Hayden Mostert, just Kenneth Walker, and even the preseason darling Julian McLaughlin just played very well. When you look at yards after contact per attempt, he was better than Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan, Najee, David Montgomery, Pacheco. Insert running back name that you're probably going to be targeting in the first couple of rounds of your fantasy football draft. So I think as somebody that you can, I think he's going to be dwarfed because people are going to be worried about the knee situation. And one of the knocks about him coming out of college was that I believe he came out of Tulane, I believe, was that he's one of those running backs. He doesn't have any meniscus left in his legs. Like what is he? I'm trying to think about the running back from the Miami Dolphins who got traded to the Eagles the year they won the Super Bowl.
Jay Ajayi.
Yeah, is he Jay Ajayi? Is he the next Jay Ajayi who's going to be good for a year? In which case, does that make him more of a redraft, late round flyer versus a dynasty? That could be had for argument, for debate. But I do think just because of the explosive nature of what we saw last year, not to mention, and we also saw what we saw from Tony Pollard last year, is let's keep these players where they perform the best, right? Mm-hmm. Tony Pollard is not going to be your every down, grinded out running back like he was last year. I don't believe so, at least. I think they use him more out of the backfield. They use him like they did in Dallas when Ezekiel Elliott was the plotter, and then you get the explosive plays to move the chains from Tajay Spears is what I'm anticipating there in Tennessee. So I like him for dynasty purposes. I'm a little concerned just because of the medical.
Do you guys have a concern that Tennessee quickly popped money on Pollard? And I really feel he's a similar player to Tajay Spears. They do a lot of the same things. And there were so many running backs out there. They could have paid that same contract to a lot of different players because that's what the going rate was. And they could have, if they wanted a different style back. So, I mean, it just puzzled me. Why would you have two similar backs? What were you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, so I guess one way you could look at it is like redundancy. If Tajay kind of craps out, then you have Tony Pollard filling in his role there. But the fact, I would like to think that the front office and the general manager have some faith in Tajay Spears to the point where he can shoulder a load, and they wouldn't be dumb enough to bring in two of the same running back without having a, lightning and thunder counter punch situation going on there. It would have made more sense if they kept Derrick Henry and then brought in Tony Pollard. Then that makes sense. That duo makes sense. But it just tells from what they're doing, what they're showing. They're going all in on Tajay Spears, I believe, at the running back position here in Tennessee.
Okay. That's interesting that you say that. And like for me, I feel that it's just one of those things where he was just a holdover from the previous regime. They come in and Callahan and Holes want to do their thing. So they're like, hey, who's a guy that we think they can do what we want to do? And they go after Pollard, even though Spears can do a lot of the same things, or maybe they just want to see like a completely different role. And who knows? Maybe they run the wing T. Maybe Levis is out there. Like, who knows?
Man.
That is a really good question. I'm really not sure. But yeah, I think they wanted Pollard because, like you said, they spent the money and they got him early. So I'm thinking that they wanted to get Pollard. What their plan is, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm very, very interested to see what it is. And that Chris Battisdale asking in the chat, like, who's the better Spears? Is it Tajay Spears or Aries? I'm gonna have to go with Tajay right now. No. I take that back. Aries does all the expressions, like impersonations and everything. So until I can hear Tajay give me like a Jay-Z impersonation, then I'm gonna go with Aries right now. You guys
I'm going
got
Brittany.
any thoughts on that? What's that?
I'm going with Brittany.
That's exactly who I thought, Jim, right there with you.
Yeah. Brittany. Yeah, Jim.
Brittany,
Right.
one more time.
Love it.
That's right. Hit me.
I won't sing it. I'll save everybody the pain.
I mean, I was ready for you. Like I'll sing backup for you.
I did the fireworks before, man. I had it going.
I saw that. I was thinking of Katy Perry when I saw the fireworks.
Ooh, look at
I think we got some karaoke songs at the Fantasy Football Expo in August that are going to be.
Oh my gosh, that's a couple high notes to hit there. That's gonna be problematic. Yes.
I gotta warm up the golden pipes, but I think I can get there. I think really highly of myself.
Risk and croon.
Hey Jim, there's a running back in particular that you're pretty excited to talk about. Do you mind jumping to him for a second?
Yeah, I do want to talk about Kendre Miller. And some people, that name is bouncing out there. And a lot of people are like, why is everybody on Kendre Miller? And I get it. But I want to point this out. Alvin Kamara for fantasy was great last year. Anybody who rostered Alvin Kamara was super excited. Missed 3 games, first 3 games here. We knew he was missing those. He puts up over 1,100 yards, 75 catches, and Alvin Kamara is not a fantasy league winner, but he was part of the equation. But Alvin Kamara, from the NFL perspective, the team watching him down to down, this was a player in steep decline. The player who could break tackles effortlessly down to the 15th percentile last year. Superman after contact and after the catch, 27th percentile after contact, 24th percentile after the catch. Alvin Kamara, from an NFL perspective, was as close to done as you could see. And he's going to be 29 this year. So it's another year. And he's not getting better at this point. Kendre Miller, we didn't see a lot. He had the 2 injuries. He had the hammy injury in the preseason. He had a late season ankle that cost him a lot of time. So it was a real small sample size. And we got to be careful with this. But he was a 3rd round pick. Yet he was 75th percentile Kendre Miller in breaking tackles, 80th percentile after contact. So given a small sample size, he did potentially look like the player they drafted. Now, he had 2 games where he got significant work. New England held him to 3 yards a carry, but they were lights out against the run. In that game, he still caught 4 for 53. But Miller played week 18 against Atlanta. He went 6 yards a carry and scored a touchdown. Again, small sample. But if Alvin Kamara is continued in his decline, this team drafted Miller in the 3rd round, and Jamal Williams looked done last year. So I really believe going into the season, Kamara gets 60%, Miller gets 40%. But if Kamara continues to struggle, I think Kendre Miller is going to flip that script and be the lead back in the second half of the season.
Love it. I can't argue anything about that. I love it. I mean, you said perfectly. I can't add anything to it. Jim Coventry, ladies and gentlemen. He's a firework.
Nice.
No, but
get it going again.
I love it. We saw a little taste of what he could do the last week of the season last year. And again, looking at these, second-year players, he's right there at the top in terms of, efficiency metrics, whether it's yards per route run or yards after the catch per reception. So Yeah. So let me go back to you, Jim, for a second and ask you a similar question to what I asked you earlier. Is he somebody that you would pay up for in dynasty drafts, or is he still not worth the high price for you?
You know what? Again, the third round pick investment. With running backs, obviously last year we had Gibbs and we had Bijan going in the first round, but typically running backs aren't going in the first round. So when you have a third round running back, that's like the equivalent of a second rounder back in the day. That's a player, and it was like the 8th pick of the third round. So this is a player with a high draft premium that the Saints must have saw a lot they liked. So look, volume's king in fantasy football. And based on the little bit we saw last year, he looked like he fit. He should be in line very soon. If Kamara gets through this year, I mean, he's got to be at the end. So, yes, I think you pursue Kendre Miller now after he did very little last year. And again, I want to point out, people perceive that Kamara is still great because of the 1,100 yards. For fantasy, again, he was gold. He wasn't a good running back.
Right. Would you say that he was the Rashad White of running backs last year?
Yes.
Is that insulting to Rashad White? I don't know. I don't know who's that more insulting towards, but I digress.
Hey, so guys, I have a quick question. So one more sophomore that we're going to talk about before we get to like our next spot. I'm going to say he's probably going to, no, I'm not going to say probably. What are your thoughts on the potential number one receiving option for Josh Allen in Buffalo next year in Dalton Kincaid? What are your thoughts on Dalton going to his second season? Go ahead, Jorge.
Honestly, man, this hurts. This hurts, and it's kind of a hottish take. I actually really like Curtis Samuel going over to the Buffalo Bills. You looked at last time that he and Coach Brady, worked their magic in Carolina. He had over 1,000 yards. He was utilized out of the backfield in the running game. He was utilized in such a playmaking capacity that Ron Rivera and the coaching staff in Washington just did not do. They bring him over in free agency. I'm not going to say he's going to replace Stephon Diggs' target volume. Obviously they have other receiving weapons like Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid. So I don't agree that he's going to be the target guy. I don't think this is a situation where it's a Mahomes-Kelsey 1-2 punch here just yet, because I think there are other playmakers. We saw down the stretch last year for the Buffalo Bills that Josh Allen was spreading the ball around to more receivers than Stephon Diggs. Whether or not that contributed to Stephon Diggs getting traded or not is a different story. I don't know. So I don't think you're going to see him be the number one target, but he will be emphasized in this offense.
Okay. Jim, your thoughts?
It's like Jorge said, we had the connection from Brady to Curtis Samuel. My concern is the slot. First of all, how many 3 receiver sets is Buffalo running? It's not going to be a ton. I know they're heavy personnel. They were like 26%. It was like a little below average. But that said, Khalil Shakir had 91% of his targets in the slot. So he was like a slot. Curtis Samuel is about all his career. He's like a 70-75% slot guy. So if you're going to play a lot of base personnel, who's on the outside? And that's going to be problematic because Samuel can play the outside, but he's not a traditional outside receiver. Right. And Keon Coleman should be, he should be able to get some outside targets as, big wingspan and that. But don't rule out a world. You're going to laugh at this. But when they're in a 2 receiver base personnel set and you're looking, they always like to have Gabe Davis in the downfield role. Don't be surprised if Mac Hollins is playing in some 2 receiver sets to stretch the field. 2 years ago when he was with the Raiders, he was good. And then, of course, of all places, he goes to Atlanta where you knew he'd rot and die. But Mac Hollins, when you throw deep to him, he's always been better than Gabe Davis in terms of a reliable downfield, but he just hasn't carved out a niche in his career. Now, I'm not saying Mac Hollins is playing 700 snaps, but I am saying I'm very worried about these because Shakir was like 91% of his targets were in the slot. That's their slot guy, and he played well. Every game he had 6 targets or more, he posted big yardage. So I just wonder, how do you fit Samuel in? I agree with Jorge. Very talented, Swiss Army knife, history with the coach. I'm just trying to factor out how to get these guys on the field.
Hey, I love that. Jorge, I have a quick question for you. Are there any commanders that you that are still on the team that you like, or you just like all the ones that left? That's rhetorical. You don't have to answer.
I like all of them. I like all of them. That's the safe answer, right? I like all of them.
Yeah, I love it. Bayou Bengal Fantasy Network. We're doing good, man. Thanks for hanging out. You and everybody else that's rocking with us tonight. We definitely appreciate it. Guys, Albert has a question. He's like, what are the thoughts on Chase Brown as a breakout this season? Jorge.
So just as we were talking about Kendra Miller and the upside you have there and how good of a running and receiving option he is, where Kendra Miller was here in terms of receiving metrics, in terms of efficiency, Chase Brown was here, right? And so last year we saw Joe Mixon in the Bengals. You know, he was Joe Mixon. He was somebody who would get the attempts, he would get the passing volume, get the targets. You look to Zach over in Indianapolis, he actually didn't get too much of the receiving work. He was more of just a rushing attempt guy. So now you're bringing him over. Now, whether that's by scheme or he's just not a good receiver, take that for what he will. But they bring him over to Cincinnati. He's their number one running back as we speak right now. And they're going to need somebody to pick up the slack here in the receiving game that, you know, the targets that are vacated by Joe Mixon no longer being there. And I think Chase Brown has tremendous upside here in especially in PPR formats.
I like it. Jim, thoughts on Chase?
I'm going to start with Zach Moss because I think that's where the equation needs to get set. And I think what Cincinnati's going to find out very fast is that Zach Moss is fool's gold. First of all, he got run out of Buffalo, and he had every opportunity facing light boxes, couldn't get it done there. And we know the last 4 games of 2022, Zach Moss was excellent. And then the first 4 games of 2023, he was excellent. From that point on, he was still seeing significant work because Taylor was eased in, and then he got hurt late. Zach Moss was less than 4 yards per carry behind a very good Indianapolis run blocking line. And even though Moss broke tackles above average rate, below average in yards after contact, and after the catch 39th percentile. So he was not doing a lot once the ball was in his hands. And so that said, I think that the Bengals think they have this grinder back. They don't. They do not. That offensive line is way worse run blocking than what he had in Indy. So Chase Brown, I think immediately is going to be splitting early down work. I think instead of Brown being a change of pace guy, I think they're both going to see about 12 carries each. And that's going to be better for Brown. And in terms of receiving back, I mean, I love Brown coming out of Illinois. I thought he was going to be a legitimate receiving back coming into the league. And I do think when last year at the end of the year, when they had Jake Browning in there, the offense changed. It wasn't the Joe Burrow offense. It was a lot of play action stuff. They were trying to keep him comfortable, right? Well, Joe Burrow is a completely different quarterback, and they're not going to do all the bells and whistles because Burrow does, and this is spoken to with the coaches, Zach Taylor. Burrow does what Burrow's comfortable doing. So if he wants to play out of the gun and he wants his 2 receivers, Higgins and Chase, if they don't win immediately, he's dumping to his running back. I think that's Chase Brown a lot. I think Chase Brown I think his draft stock is going to go way up as we get closer to August. But in drafts right now, you can get him outside the top 36 running backs, and I think he's a screaming deal.
So, Jim, just to piggyback off of that with Zach Moss, last week you were on 4th and Frames with Rhett, Chris, and Drew. You just broke Drew's heart because he was making a case a couple weeks ago that Zach Moss was a good value this year. Chris Battistel was on the other side. So you made a extra friend of Chris Battistel. Drew Scott is over here crying in the corner, but it is what it is. It is what it is.
And I like Zach Moss. I mean, I was invested in him late in 2022. I definitely liked him early last year. But you know what? Here's the important thing, and I'm learning this, and I always try to get better at it. Opinions and takes on players could change weekly, and we always have to keep up with the current reality of a player is. And the last that we've seen of Zach Moss, and it's a pretty good sample of games, it was not the same back. So yeah, that's the whole thing. It's just always being willing to change an opinion on a player.
Yeah, for sure. I like it. All right. So those are some of the breakouts that we got coming for the upcoming season for the sophomore year. And tune in and let us know when, what you think or who we missed or who you want to talk about. We'll make sure to respond to you and try to get those answers. All right. So now we're going to move on. So Jim, we're going to do is rapid fire buy or sell storylines. So I'm going to give you the storyline. You tell me whether you're buying it or you're selling it. So whether you're like, yeah, I believe that, or Yeah, get that out of my way. All right. So we're going to start off with the first one. Well, Romeo Doubs, he'll be one of the top 2 wide receivers for the Packers in fantasy. All right, so I'm just going to clean it up because I said that terribly. Romeo Doubs will finish top 2 wide receiver for the Packers in fantasy football.
Selling, and you don't want a reason. You just want, I'm selling. You don't want a reason.
If you want to give a reason, I'm listening.
13.5% touchdown rate last year. Completely unsustainable. He only had 674 yards last year, Dobbs. So it was like 8 touchdowns on 59 catches. That's not happening this year.
Gotcha. Jorge, buy or sell?
Sell. I think Christian Watson is not going to be the guy that I'm excited for, who's going to need some help getting on the field. But if he does, is Dontavion Wicks. It's just an issue of whether or not how he gets on the field. But once he does get on the field, he's going to stay on the field, I believe.
I like it. I'm with you guys. So it's a clean sweep. I'm selling also. I feel like they're all going to cannibalize each other and nobody's really going to be anything that's the greatest thing ever. And they remind me a lot of the New York Football Giants 2 years ago when they were on that tear. They limped into the playoffs, and then the next year they were with this. But anyhow, moving on. Buy or sell? Jorge, coming to you first. Stephon Diggs will finish as the wide receiver 1 in Houston.
Sell. They just locked up the wide receiver 1 in a contract in Nico Collins last week, so that's a sell for me.
I like it. Jim, buy or sell?
Sell, and I wish Collins wouldn't have signed that contract too quickly because I saw this way before that even happened. Look, I'll make this real quick. Nico Collins was a proper alpha in the Bobby Slowick offense, getting schemed into space and getting yards after the catch. That's what that offense is all about. Nico Collins, there was never a world where he was the number 1. The 1 year, Diggs on a 1 year deal. They weren't going to push Collins down to a number 2 for 1 year and say, okay, you can come back and get it next year. That was never going to happen. No logical reality. So this is Nico Collins' offense.
All right. Jim, back at you. Travis Kelce will finish outside the top 5 tight ends this year.
No way. I'm selling. He's going to be in tight end 1 this year.
Agreed.
All right. Clean sweep again.
Did you see how he played when he was healthy in the playoffs? Yeah, he's tight end 1.
No, absolutely. All right. So we're buying or selling. Zay Flowers will finish as a top 10 wide receiver. Jim.
Selling hard. In the playoffs, he did great. He didn't have 80 yards in any of his first 15 games, 5 or fewer catches in 11, 16 games. He's not an alpha type receiver in any way, shape, or form. Real nice possession guy, some speed too. No, so.
Gotcha. All right, Jorge, coming to you on this one. Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard will both finish top 25 at the position.
As much as I love my Tajay Spears here, I'm going to say that they both do not make it in the top 25 at their position.
I'm selling that as well. Jim, what says you, my friend?
Make it 3 across the board. Clean sweep.
Yeah, so did anybody buy anything in that section? I don't think so. Like, we're lean. We're lean in our shopping cart.
Oh, wow. No, we didn't buy a single thing.
They got to show it. They got to show it to us before we start taking these bold takes here.
I absolutely love it. All right, everybody. And with that, we have wrapped up yet another episode of Dynasty 365. Major thanks to Mr. Jim Coventry. You can find him at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter. Make sure you follow him online. And Jim, please tell the people where they can find you and your work during the week.
Yeah, really the X at Jim Coventry. And if I'm doing 2 stat of the days, you can only get 160 characters. So I'm giving a stat and I'm giving a real quick hit advice and actionable advice on that. That's been a real fun series. And if you want a free trial at RotoWire, no credit card needed, go to rotowire.com/Jim, cover all the sports. You want fantasy and frames, of course, but if you want baseball, all the other things, RotoWire's got you covered there.
I love it. I love it. And also, Bayou, we didn't miss you, but we did talk about Will Levis a little bit in the show. So to get that take, when we drop it on YouTube tomorrow, make sure that you check it out and get all that goodness, the Will Levis talk. I think it was real good stuff, and I'm not biased at all. But anyway, I thank you, Bayou, and I thank everyone who just watched us on YouTube. And those of you who are listening to us through the magic of podcast, we appreciate you too. Follow us on Twitter. The boss man is at Jorge B. Edwards. I'm at Dynasty Deviant. And you can also find all of our work on the website, www.fantasyinframes.com. Make sure you subscribe to the show on the YouTube, wherever you consume your favorite podcast. While you're there, please give us a like, subscribe, leave a review, and also hit that bell just so you don't miss any of the fantasy goodness that is coming from the Fantasy in Frames crew. And there's a lot of it. You just watched us, but there's also shows like Fourth and Frames that comes up after us, where they talk about redraft. We got you covered for the Dynasty 365 and the Dynasty needs. And for those IDP guys, those true IDP guys out there, we got Shoot the Gap for the IDP content. So make sure that you tune in on Thursday for the Fantasy Football Weekly and the Draft Show. I thank everybody for hanging out with us. Now it's time to play the pomp and circumstance. Let's graduate from mediocrity and rise to champions of our leagues. We will catch you all next time. Thanks for hanging out with us.